Hello Year 1, I'm Finn Mulford and I co-directed Fantasy Jewels with Scarlett Keeley. So Fantasy Jewels personally was sort of the culmination of a few other films I had made before university. My first two big projects were essentially portrait documentaries about a ceramicist and then a painter. So knowing that we'd be working in larger teams, I really wanted to take something I'd already been exploring, but to expand the scope to a level that I would never have been able to achieve on my own. None of the team obviously knew anything about glass blowing or glass work, so we spent 2 or 3 days just researching online and speaking to Adam himself, which was really, really great because it gave us a huge idea of what we'd be filming and sort of the process of what we'd be filming. So the portrait documentaries are hugely, hugely valuable just in terms of building team skills and networking skills. Obviously, you're going to be talking to people that you don't know, that they don't know you. So convincing people that it's worth doing and pitching your idea becomes a really large part of the unit. But also working with a team and learning how to make a film with a team of creatives is the most important thing you can learn. And if there is one piece of advice that I would say is important over all else, is not getting attached to roles. In Year 1, it's really, really important that the film comes first. You want to have a base of some really great films that you are proud of, that you learn a lot doing, and you can look back at and pinpoint things that change the way you looked at filmmaking. But, it's really, really exciting. You've got some really fun days and weeks ahead of you. So I hope you enjoy the unit, and I hope UCA is good.
It's really odd that I ended up being a glassmaker because it was not intentional at all. My mother had just started a shop and gallery selling some antiques and some modern china and glass, and I said that I would help her for a little while. It was a natural thing that when somebody came into the shop selling glass one day to quip, "Oh, I wouldn't mind having a go at that." And the next thing I knew was that somebody had sent a letter saying, "I heard you wanted to do a glass blowing course." There's a fundamental difference between working as an artist and being a skilled craftsman, but I really do think of myself as an artist, and when I'm learning things all the time, I'm thinking about what I'm trying to get as my final result, and then how do I actually use the glassblowing skills to get there. thing about this body of work is that I'd been thinking about it for a very long time. Actually, it dates back to the first course that I did in 1977, because the other student was doing some work that we called dribbling class, and at the time we were probably a little bit critical of it, but I could see what fascinated her about this, and it's that fascination that I think collectors and people who buy glass always are drawn to. In order to create the final form, I've got to heat up the bubble in the middle, hot enough to manipulate it. But if I get it too hot, then the lattice will just collapse. And so it's a really exciting process, and I've designed it in such a way that each time I do it, I don't want to get better at doing it, because the whole idea about the process, it's controlled, uncontrolled, shall we say. And the whole idea is that if I get too good at it, then it'll just become slick and we'll lose the naivety. There's this balance between production, craft, and work of art. And I think ultimately what one hopes is that the viewer will actually see a piece and it'll make their heart beat and their spirit will soar, and they'll actually feel the same way about it as I did when I made it.
Hi, my name is Millie Cordy and I was the producer for Dance in Absence in Year 1 for the Bolex project. The story is about a privileged young girl who organises a birthday party that nobody shows up to, so we needed to have quite a realistically looking fancy dining room to shoot in, and that was quite a struggle because obviously a lot of student houses have very basic, cheap looking IKEA tables. So what I ended up doing was I went on Airbnb and I contacted about 30 different houses around Surrey if we could use their dining room. But the next big thing was production design. So luckily for me, I managed to find a warehouse which has old props from shops that they take from old shop displays and they leave them there for people to do their school productions. I said that I was assisting in a school production, so I got to take home most of the props that were there with my production designer for free. But I don't advise doing that. That's not something that you've got easy access to. It's just I happen to have teachers in the family, so I was able to go in there and do that. All of the plates and the food and the party decorations are from Poundland, so everything was £1 each, so it cost us barely anything. The other thing is working with actual film stock is very difficult, so we made sure that the cinematographer and the director were very well versed in loading and unloading the film stocks, but everyone in the crew had attended those workshops to learn about that, so everyone was on hand to work out any problems that came up if that happened. And we didn't really have many problems with shooting. We had a few shots that were a little bit overexposed and one shot that was out of focus, but actually at the end of the day that it still came out pretty well considering. In first year there's a lot of empty time on the timetable, and I wish that I had taken advantage of that time. The equipment is there, the people are there. If you want to shoot something, you can do that. A lot of people don't realise in first year that third years do need runners, they do need people to help on set, and if you just message them and ask if you can help on any of the grad projects, they'd be happy for you to be there and learn something, so long as you don't talk during a take. I think that's the only exception that might make them a little bit angry. Good luck for this unit. I hope that you work really hard and you'll be considerate of the producer on shoots and don't be late. And that your films come out really good.
Well, yeah.
No, darling.
It's
No,
lovely.
no, I don't think I'll be
Okay,
going.
good.
No, it's not quite on my street.
Yeah, that's nice.
No, you do look lovely today, though. Lovely.
Yeah, it's really
Thank you very much.
Ah, yes. Grand, yes.
No, it's not quite on my street.
We used to go to a little pub. Well, I used to go to a little pub with my friend called the Hen and Chicks. And Alan had a friend called Vic, and he was living at the time in Diggs. And he used to go to the Hen and Chicks. And he just asked my friend out, and he asked myself out the same day, same night. So he said, what can I do? What shall I do, Vic? And then Vic says, well, just choose which one you think is the best, like, you know, which. So he chose me, and then I said, hey, later that evening, he bought me drinks and that, and then later that evening he said, can I walk you home? And I said, no, no. I think, you know, those were the happy times. Great times together, great friends you meet. Really enjoy life.
The 18 yellow roses came today. I opened up the card to see what it said. I couldn't believe my eyes when I had read. Though you belong to another, I love you anyway. Yes, 18 yellow roses came today. I never doubted your love for a minute.
Right, Alan was diagnosed in 2012 of vascular dementia, which eventually means his at the end of it, he will have no control over his toilet, and eventually won't know me. I accept, but you know that's how the illness takes. And as a carer, you just have to make them comfortable as much as you can, love them as much as you can, and just, they do like a lot of touch. And yeah, just make him happy, really.
Well, yeah, it's a shame he's gone the way he has.
Yeah.
You don't know what's in store, do you?
No.
Hey? Just don't know what's in store.
No. So it's not a good situation at the moment, and of course, as you say, you by yourself. You are by yourself. There is no conversational skills at night. It's a very, very isolated, and you do just take on the care, you know, for him, and that's all you can do. Yeah, and it is so it's a hard work, really. When he was diagnosed, it's sort of a little bit of relief, but not knowing what the future brings and how fast he's going to deteriorate. When Alan was 50, I did a big surprise and bought him a jukebox. When we moved to France, it had to come with us. And he wouldn't come back to England unless he bought his jukebox. He must have realised himself not being ill and said, I said, well, I think we'll go back to England. And he put his arm around me and he said, thank God. So, you know, it's been a long journey as well, but yeah, it means a lot to him. And of course, when we was going to sell it, and Alan said, yeah, we'll have to sell it, but he pulled on our heartstrings once. We was over at, well, say, Jenny, my son-in-law's mother, and he said, get me up to my jukebox. So we stood him up to his jukebox, and he went, I love my jukebox. So we couldn't sell it. It had to come with him everywhere, and he loves it. I will look after Alan as long as I can in this home. I don't intend to push him in a home or anything until things have really, really gone bad. And the fact that he wouldn't know me more, you know, when it comes to that sort of thing.
Make me
Hi guys, I'm Logan Bailey and I was the producer, writer and director on the Year 1 Bolex film Finding Peace in 2019. Finding Peace is about just that, it's about finding peace. We follow Steve, the businessman, at his job. He takes it way too seriously, he has no real social life, his life is run by the clock. He is at a work gathering and he starts to suffer kind of anxiety. He's not working, he doesn't know what to do, he's a bit awkward, he gets overwhelmed. On the way home, he's frustrated, he's self-loathing. He comes across this homeless man named Jack the Traveller. Jack seems really happy with his life, although objectively he's living on the street. This puzzles our protagonist Steve, who goes, why is this man so happy when his life is so bad? Why am I so miserable when I'm earning quite a lot of money? And he goes and sits down next to Jack, and Jack just shows him tranquility. As the two sit there silently, without exchanging any words, they just whistle the tune to Steamboat Willie, reminding Steve of Mickey Mouse and his childhood. After he's had this experience, this wordless experience, Jack feels like he has told Steve everything he needs to know about life, which is not to take it too seriously, which is to slow down and relax a little bit, and to just really take life at your own pace. I really did learn a lot making this film, especially working with film stock, working with actual 16mm film was something I had never done before working on Finding Peace, and it really tells you how much you take for granted the digital software, because these cameras are really heavy and you have to have the light shining up so bright just to get it inside the camera. And that was a real challenge. Working mostly about dialogue, and you're working with these very loud bits of equipment that take a long time to set up. I think a big part of what I learned on this film was to fix problems before they even happen. Work with changing our actor, even work with maybe having potential backup locations. And this was stuff I never had to think about before. It was all about managing contingency plans for problems that may arise during production and having to think about it. Editing manually is some of the most fun I have ever had at UCA. You really feel like you are making a movie, and is way better than Premiere Pro. Another thing I've learned, and I'm going to relay this information to you guys, is that the exposure is never high enough. When I was doing my Bolex, I spoke to a third year at the time and asked what their Bolex experience was like, and they gave me the one piece of advice: put that exposure up. And when I tried to relay that to my crew, they kept saying, Logan, it's too high, it's too high. No, it's the right place. Stop telling me to put it up, it will look weird. And when we got the footage back, it was way too dark and it wasn't good, it wasn't where we wanted it. So put that exposure up. If you think it's too high, it ain't high enough. Crank that boy right up, just for safety. Another thing I would have done differently is I would have just had fun. I think around this time I was so stressed with my identity. What am I going to specialize in next year? What am I doing outside of the course? I'm this and that and this and that. What's that person saying? And I would have just enjoyed it. I would have just really been like, this is a new experience that'll help me grow as a filmmaker, and just really make the most of it. Because it was actually, in hindsight, one of my favorite projects I've done at UCA. In any case, guys, right now I'm a third year producer. I'm about to work on my grad films. If any of you want to work on a big multi-thousand-pound grad film, you message me on Facebook at Logan Bailey, because we'll be needing you. Enjoy the film, I hope you love it, I am really proud of it, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do, okay? So this is Finding Peace.
props relay to, I suppose, the audience what type of person this is that they're seeing. So that they're massively important for set decoration and production design in film and TV, hugely important.
If these places didn't exist, then you wouldn't be watching things that you watch on TV. Shows, you can't tell stories without a set that's right for the script. Of all the things I've done in this industry, I'd like to think this is the proudest thing I am of being involved in.
Props, they're hugely important because when you're dressing a set on a film or a TV production, for example, that set is telling a story.
Hi everyone, my name is Divdana Mitova and I'm the cinematographer of Transparent. As a 16mm production, it was very exciting for all of us to work on it. And for me as a cinematographer, I feel like I was the most terrified from all of us. I went to all the workshops and did so much research and made sure I know all about the settings and how to work on manual. But I was still very terrified when it came time to film, because on a 60mm you don't have the screen, you don't have a way to see what you've done, and when you film it, it's filmed, so you can't delete it. You have these 10 minutes of footage and that's all you get. So it was essential for me to do everything on point, and I was stressing all the time, but when we got our film developed, I was so happy and I was finally able to relax a bit. And I think that the hardest thing was the shooting days, because we were all under pressure, but when you put that aside, it was a lovely project to work on and we're really happy with how it turned out. So please enjoy and good luck with your films.
When you grow up, the small moments in your life turn into fragments of childhood memories. You don't exactly remember what was said and done in those moments, but you'll never forget how they made you feel. So when you're on that drive listening to that song, all it takes is a smell. or a certain flower you used to pick for your parents, and suddenly you're right back there. Everything seemed so much bigger back then, yet somehow your dreams seemed a lot more in reach than they do now. Everything was an adventure, everything was a challenge. You never had a lot, but always made something out of nothing. Your youth isn't an age or place, it's the dreams that are still within you. That child you were all those years ago is still there. So when life gets hard or boring, be the child you once were.
Hello, my name's Miles Wheeler and I produced and edited the documentary portrait film Things from the Edge, which is about the Mansell sea forts out in the Thames estuary and an artist called Stephen Turner who lived out there for 6 months. I wanted to make this documentary for about a year before I started at UCA. During my gap year, I'd sort of secured permissions to go out there. So I think straight away the first thing I learned from that project was just always have your eyes open for an idea and always be thinking about where you can be using something next. Because I think then later on in university, some of the other projects, they can sneak up on you. I felt I think I needed an entire year to think about an idea before I even do it. In Things from the Edge, we had footage of us going to the actual sea forts, and then on another day we interviewed Stephen Turner, and I think it could have maybe been a bit more visually interesting if I'd managed to secure permission for Stephen to go on the forts as well, so he would be walking around and giving his thoughts on the forts as he was seeing the things. And I think an important thing that I learned from doing that film as well is making sure before you go out to a location that everyone is on the same page in terms of sort of mood and theme. The film was sort of about isolation and loneliness. I think if we'd had sort of a little refresher before we actually started filming, when we got to the location we'd immediately be knowing what to look out for, because the environment around us would sort of trigger those words. We'd straight away know what to be shooting, as opposed to just get everything and hope, which isn't necessarily a bad technique, but if you've got a limited time, it's always good to make sure everyone's on the same page. So those are some things that I learned from Things from the Edge, my first film that I made at UCA.
I saw my own solar system. I was inventing my own cosmology, like through patterns of holes in the base of a room. I found one in the exact shape of the W of this constellation Cassiopeia and photographed it, and it was like looking at a rusty planet surface within its black sky, this constellation, and I found planets, and it was just like being an adventurer, discovering undiscovered country, except it was this micro world in a way, my own metal box. A lot of my work as an artist has taken me to abandoned places. I've been to other abandoned landscapes and abandoned forts, landscapes that are semi-abandoned, like the edges of towns, you know, where nature meets city, that kind of thing. And I think there's something really interesting about landscapes where people have been and are no longer there, where there's a sort of human presence but it's gone. And there's something I find intriguing about how nature reclaims places like that. And indeed, then, you know, the places we consider abandoned and neglected are only abandoned and neglected from a human perspective. And they are absolute, you know, fantastic residences for all hosts of other creatures. And so there's something in that as well about whose place is it, which interests me. Isolation, never felt isolated. Solitary, yes, there's this difference between a kind of isolation which can be bad and depressing, and solitude, which is something you seek and which can be enhancing and revealing. It can reveal things. I found myself thinking about things I hadn't thought about for a very long time. Childhood, to some extent. And one of my earliest memories as a kid was aged about 5. We used to live in a place called Dewsbury in West Yorkshire, in a kind of part of town long demolished. It was sort of kind of the slum clearances of the 1970s, 60s and 70s. They demolished all these terrace streets, back-to-back houses. I just started to remember that at the age of 5 and 6, I used to go off by myself with a camera and explore all the attic, all these empty houses. And I made a den in the attic of one of them, and they were all connected together. You could go up into one house at one end of the street and walk through the attics and come down in another house, another empty house at the other end of the street. And you'd find things people had left behind. They'd left photographs and furniture and things. And I had a little collection of things I found in there, and I hadn't thought about any of that until I was marooned in Shivering Sands Fort. And so I started to wonder about where one's character comes from and how it's formed, and whether you learn, you know, is what you do and what you are the product of what you've experienced and learnt, or is there something innate in each of us that is our character, that we are who we are. We're sort of formed in some respects from the day we are born to want to do certain kind of things. And I think there's part of me just enjoys going off alone and exploring and kind of making a record. They deserve to be preserved as sort of national heritage monuments. On the other hand, nothing's forever. My own experience tells me everything changes, and part of the beauty of the forts and of everything is its change, and that change in decay, and that slow reclamation of things made by people. The most brilliant engineered things of the time that we could make, the strongest things, no matter how strong, even like a pyramid in Egypt, will eventually turn to dust, or rust in this case, and will be reclaimed by the sea. And I think, in a sense, maybe that's what should happen, and the beauty of the forts lies in the fact that they've got stories to tell, and there are people who can tell the stories that go on beyond and are greater than the physical structures. I suppose the broad question is why people should care about their surroundings and the world, why how people should understand themselves, And you can do that through looking at specific instances. There are personal stories to tell about the sea forts, which and maybe society is just a collection of thousands of personal stories. So there's a moment when subjective things become really important data. Qualitative becomes quantitative in a way, and important to record and remember for everybody's what history is for. It's to help define history. Helps define who we are now and who we might want to become tomorrow. So it's important to remember all these things from the edge.
Hello, my name is Ray. I directed Hedgehog and I back in 2015, 2014, whenever I was in first year, which was a long time ago. But yeah, it's still probably one of my favourite things that I've ever directed, that I've ever worked on, which is not really a hard feat when, you know, after graduation my life has kind of gone downhill. That's a joke. That's a complete joke. I'm really successful. But yeah, it's still one of my favourite things that I've ever worked on, that I've ever directed. And yeah, it was a great experience shooting on the Bolex. I really enjoyed like the limitations that we had working with a film camera, which had such a limited runtime. Once you crank it up, you can only shoot for a limited amount of time. It really made us think about takes and value each shot individually and plan stuff to a degree that before coming to UCA that we never did before. I really enjoyed that. One of the things that we did on Hedgehog and I, which, like, you know how they always say never work with animals or kids, like, but yeah, we did both while shooting on film, and we were working with an animal which was not trained for film. It was just our producer's pet hedgehog, and getting a hedgehog to do certain things on demand when you have, I think about, was it 30 seconds on the Bolex? I wouldn't recommend trusting putting your film stock on the line for a hedgehog. But that was something we did, and it did work out for the most part. And yeah, one thing I would do differently is maybe consider the fact that you are limited to shooting on black and white. Like, try to think what stories work well on black and white, because looking at Hedgehog and I now, I kind of wish it was in colour. It feels like it was a story that is for colour. Other than that, I'm still really happy with it, but I do wish it was in colour. And maybe if we thought of something which fit the medium of black and white a bit better, or I don't know, just suited it more, maybe yeah. But that's the only thing. Other than that, I'm extremely happy with it, and I'm talking for far too long. So enjoy.
Hello, I'm Razvan, also known as Zan. I'm the cinematographer, director, and editor of the film The Vision of the Shadows. The whole idea of the film rose from the whole situation that has been going on globally with the pandemic. Furthermore, this idea was combined with an unfortunate event of mine where I lost someone I loved dearly, and the whole atmosphere of the film was full of loneliness. I also wanted to show that even your own shadow lives you in the dark in life, and I wanted to encourage the idea that you should never rely on anyone to fill you up emotionally. Learn how to face darkness on your own without any help. The cinematography style embraces darkness. For instance, there are lots of shadows and silhouettes presented in the film, but it also embraces a bright side. The visual aspect of the film was a transition from bright and colorful times slowly to the darkest moments imaginable. The feeling of emptiness is dominant in the film, and the feeling of fear of the unknown. Thankfully, my work was awarded at many festivals in the US, UK, and Europe, especially for the cinematography. This film, as you might have noticed, means a lot to me. I hope you will really appreciate it and that you will be immersed in the universe I wanted to create, even though you are already present in it.